Long before people across the city knew her name, Blessing was simply a cheerful village girl whose greatest treasure was not money, land, or fancy clothes. It was her heart. In a small green village surrounded by bushy hills, singing birds, and fields of golden maize, everyone knew Blessing as the girl who smiled before speaking. Wherever she went, laughter seemed to follow her. Even on the hardest days, she carried hope as though it were part of her clothing. Her grandmother often sat beneath a giant mango tree outside their little mud house, weaving baskets while sharing words of wisdom. One afternoon, as the warm evening sun painted the sky orange, she held Blessing's hand and said, "Child, kindness is like planting mango trees. You may not eat the first fruits, but one day someone will rest under their shade because of you." Blessing looked up with innocent eyes and nodded. "I'll never stop being kind, Grandma." Her grandmother smiled, though deep inside she wondered whether such kindness could survive in a world that often rewarded selfishness. Blessing believed every word. When she was only 10 years old, she carried elderly neighbors' firewood without being asked. She fetched water for widows whose knees could no longer bear the long walk to the river. She shared roasted maize with hungry children who had nothing to eat. Even the village animals seemed unusually comfortable around her. She rescued stubborn goats trapped inside vegetable gardens, frightened chickens chased by playful boys, and once even climbed a tree to rescue a terrified kitten that had spent 2 days crying for help. One afternoon, after chasing a runaway goat for nearly an hour across dusty paths, through banana plantations and over tiny streams, she proudly returned it to its owner. The old man laughed so hard he nearly dropped his walking stick. "Blessing," he chuckled between laughs, "that goat wasn't lost." "It wasn't?" "No. It was running away from my wife's cooking." The villagers exploded with laughter. Even the goat looked relieved. From inside the house, the old man's wife shouted, "I heard that!" The old man suddenly stopped laughing. "You hear? Even my wife has ears sharper than the village chief." The laughter grew even louder. But as the years passed, the cheerful village slowly changed. Rain became unreliable. Harvests failed. The small market grew quieter every month. Young people packed their bags one after another, leaving in crowded buses bound for the city. "They say money grows there," one young man boasted. An old farmer shook his head. "No, son. Only buildings grow there." Blessing watched many of her childhood friends disappear toward distant dreams. Eventually, there was nothing left for her in the village except hope. One cool morning before sunrise, birds sang softly as dew covered the grass. Blessing folded her few clothes into a worn-out suitcase. Her grandmother hugged her tightly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, the old woman whispered, "The city will test your heart. Don't allow it to change who you are." Tears filled Blessing's eyes. "I promise." The old woman slipped a tiny wooden cross into her granddaughter's hand. "When life becomes difficult, remember home." Blessing climbed aboard an old passenger bus whose engine sounded like a tired lion clearing its throat after swallowing dust. The conductor shouted confidently, "Don't worry, it only makes that noise when it's moving." Someone from the back replied, "So, all the time?" The passengers laughed nervously. As the bus rolled away, Blessing watched her grandmother become smaller and smaller until she disappeared behind a cloud of dust. She had no idea that the next chapter of her life would change everything. Hours later, the city skyline appeared on the horizon. Towering glass buildings pierced the clouds. Digital billboards flashed enormous advertisements every few seconds. Luxury cars glided silently along polished highways, while motorcycles squeezed through impossible gaps. People crossed busy streets without looking at one another. Everyone seemed to be racing against invisible clocks. The city was alive. But strangely, it felt lonely. The moment Blessing stepped off the bus, reality struck. Taxi drivers surrounded her. "Taxi! Taxi! I'll take you anywhere. Ignore him. Mine is cheaper." Before she could answer, one man grabbed her suitcase. Another demanded money before even telling her the fare. Confused and frightened, Blessing quickly pulled her luggage back and hurried away. Her first lesson in the city came within 5 minutes. Trust nobody too quickly. She eventually rented a tiny single room in a crowded apartment block squeezed between two noisy streets. The walls were so thin she could hear every argument next door. Her tiny window refused to close properly. Every night the curtain danced even when there was no wind. Her neighbor whispered dramatically, "I think this room is haunted." Blessing smiled. No. The landlord is simply too stingy to buy proper windows. Even the neighbor burst into laughter. The following morning she woke before sunrise, determined to find work. She spent the entire day walking from office to office. Everywhere she heard the same words. "We're not hiring. Leave your number. We'll call you." Nobody ever called. Outside one modern office building, she watched a security guard chase away an elderly beggar who was quietly asking for food. "Get away from here!" the guard shouted. "You scare away customers!" The old man stumbled and fell. Businessmen in expensive suits walked past without stopping. Some looked at him. Most pretended they hadn't seen him. Blessing immediately rushed over. She helped him stand, dusted off his clothes, bought him tea and bread from a nearby kiosk, and sat beside him while he ate. His name was Mazie Daniel. With trembling hands, he accepted the food. "I used to own a small shop," he said quietly. "Then sickness took everything." Blessing listened without interrupting. Before leaving, she smiled warmly. "I may not have much, Mizzy Daniel, but whenever I eat, you won't go hungry if I can help it." Tears filled the old man's eyes. No one had spoken to him with such kindness in years. Days turned into weeks. Money disappeared quickly. Still, whenever Blessing bought food, she always shared part of it with Muzzy Daniel. Even when all she had was one loaf of bread, she divided it into two. One rainy afternoon, she noticed several street children fighting over a single loaf of bread that had fallen from a delivery truck. Drivers shouted impatiently. People watched from a distance. Nobody intervened. Blessing hurried across the busy road, narrowly avoiding speeding motorcycles. She bought several fresh loaves and carefully divided them among the children. Instead of walking away, she sat on the pavement beside them. She asked their names. She listened to their stories. Some had lost parents. Some had escaped violent homes. Others couldn't even remember the last time someone had asked how they were feeling. For nearly an hour, the noisy city disappeared. There was only laughter, smiles, and hope. From that day forward, they called her Sister Blessing. Whenever she passed through the neighborhood, the children came running. One boy named Kevin always joked, "If I become rich, I'll buy you the biggest mansion in the city." Blessing laughed. "Start by buying yourself some shoes." Everyone burst into laughter. Kevin looked down at his bare feet. Good point. But not everyone appreciated her kindness. Some people mocked her. Others called her foolish. One office worker sneered, "Kindness doesn't pay rent?" Another laughed, "She's wasting food on people who'll never change." Blessing never argued. She simply smiled and continued helping others, unknown to everyone around her. Someone had quietly begun noticing her. From the tinted window of a sleek black luxury car that often passed through the city center, a mysterious elderly gentleman watched Blessing from a distance. He saw her help strangers without expecting anything in return. He never introduced himself. He never spoke to her. Instead, he quietly instructed his driver, "Find out who that young woman is." The driver nodded. Neither Blessing nor anyone else realized that this silent observation would soon set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. Days turned into months. Blessing quickly discovered that surviving in the city meant accepting any honest work that came her way. Some mornings she washed dishes in a crowded roadside restaurant before sunrise. By afternoon she cleaned office corridors. At night she swept apartment staircases until her feet ached. Life became a never-ending race against exhaustion. Yet every morning she woke up with the same quiet prayer. "Lord, help me become a blessing to someone today." Her first steady job came at a popular city restaurant called Sunrise Garden Restaurant. The restaurant was always full. Government officials held meetings there. Young couples celebrated birthdays. Business executives discussed million-dollar deals over expensive meals. Blessing worked as a waitress. She moved swiftly between tables carrying trays almost as large as herself. She memorized customers' favorite meals. She greeted everyone with genuine warmth. Soon, many regular customers began asking, "Where's the smiling waitress?" "If Blessing isn't serving today, we'll wait." Her kindness made people feel at home. One rainy afternoon, an elderly customer accidentally dropped his wallet while paying. Several people noticed. Nobody said a word. Blessing quietly picked it up and ran nearly 2 blocks after him through pouring rain. By the time she caught him, both of them were soaked. The old man opened the wallet. Every coin was still inside. He looked at her in amazement. "My daughter, do you know how many people would have kept this?" Blessing smiled. "I don't count other people's money. I count my blessings." The old man blessed her before leaving. Unfortunately, not everyone appreciated her honesty. One jealous waitress named Lydia rolled her eyes. "There she goes again." "Miss Perfect." Another waiter laughed. "One day she'll donate her own salary to strangers." The restaurant manager often praised Blessing in front of everyone. Learn from her. Customers returned because of people like Blessing. Instead of inspiring the staff, the compliments fueled jealousy. One afternoon, Lydia deliberately gave Blessing far too many tables to serve. She hoped Blessing would make mistakes. Instead, Blessing calmly served every customer with her usual smile. When Lydia accidentally spilled hot soup onto an important client, Blessing rushed over without hesitation. She apologized, cleaned the table, arranged another meal, and even comforted Lydia before comforting the customer. After work, Lydia asked quietly, "Why did you help me?" "I wanted you to be embarrassed." Blessing smiled. "If one person falls, we all look bad." Lydia had no answer. Months later, the restaurant reduced its staff during difficult financial times. Blessing lost her job. She packed her apron, thanked everyone, and walked away without bitterness. Within a week, she found employment as a live-out house helper for a wealthy family living in one of the city's luxurious neighborhoods. Their mansion was enormous. Marble floors reflected the ceiling lights. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above every room. The family owned 3 luxury cars, yet despite all their wealth, peace was nowhere to be found. The lady of the house, Mrs. Veronica, expected perfection. "If I see one fingerprint, I'll know." Blessing smiled politely. "Yes, madam." Every day she woke before dawn. She swept the compound, prepared breakfast, washed clothes, ironed expensive suits, polished silver cutlery, watered flowers, cleaned windows, organized wardrobes, prepared tea for unexpected guests. By the time the family finished breakfast, Blessing had already completed enough work for 3 people. Still, she never complained. One afternoon she discovered that the family's youngest son had secretly failed several examinations. The frightened boy cried alone in the garden. Instead of reporting him immediately, Blessing encouraged him. Mistakes don't define you. Giving up does. She secretly helped him study every evening after finishing her chores. Months later, his grades improved dramatically. His parents praised expensive tutors. Neither of them realized who had truly helped their son. Meanwhile, Mrs. Veronica's sister disliked Blessing from the very beginning. She smiles too much. It's suspicious. One afternoon, she deliberately placed an expensive diamond necklace beneath the sofa. Later, she shouted, "My necklace is missing!" Everyone panicked. Security guards searched every room. Blessing's small handbag was even emptied onto the table. Nothing was found. Hours later, the little boy quietly walked into the living room holding the necklace. "I found it under the sofa." An awkward silence filled the mansion. Mrs. Veronica looked embarrassed. Blessing simply smiled. "It's all right, madam." The woman lowered her eyes. For the first time, she realized she had judged an innocent person unfairly. Despite this, the family later relocated overseas. Once again, Blessing found herself unemployed. She sighed, then smiled. My next opportunity must be somewhere. For several weeks, she survived by cleaning offices and apartment buildings. She swept staircases, collected garbage, polished windows so brilliantly that birds occasionally flew straight into them. One cleaner laughed, "Blessing, your windows are too clean. You're confusing wildlife." Everyone burst into laughter. Despite earning very little, Blessing encouraged her fellow cleaners. When one cleaner became seriously ill, Blessing secretly completed half of her workload without asking for extra pay. When another employee lost his bus fare, Blessing quietly gave him hers and walked nearly 10 kilometers home. She arrived exhausted, but smiling. One evening, while returning from work, she noticed an elderly woman struggling with heavy shopping bags beside a busy road. Cars rushed past impatiently. Nobody stopped. Blessing crossed the traffic, carried every bag, and walked the woman all the way home. When they arrived, the grateful woman reached into her purse. "Please accept something." Blessing shook her head. "I already received my payment." The woman looked puzzled. "What payment?" "Your smile." The old woman stood speechless. She watched Blessing disappear down the street with tears in her eyes. Little by little, stories about the mysterious kind young woman spread throughout the neighborhood. Shopkeepers admired her honesty. Security guards greeted her warmly. Taxi drivers trusted her enough to let her pay later whenever she lacked enough money. Street vendors secretly slipped an extra banana into her shopping bag. "Interest," they joked, "for investing in kindness." One fruit seller laughed, "If kindness were money, you'd own this whole market." Finally, after months of uncertainty, Blessing secured a permanent cleaning position at one of the city's most respected grooming businesses, Franky's Barber Shop. The shop looked more like a luxury hotel lobby than a salon. Large glass walls reflected the morning sunshine. Modern leather barber chairs stood in neat rows. Soft jazz music played through hidden speakers. Expensive perfumes filled the air. Customers booked appointments weeks in advance. Every day began at exactly 6:30 in the morning. Before anyone else arrived, Blessing unlocked the cleaning cupboard. She polished mirrors until they shone like crystal. She swept away every strand of hair from the previous evening. She disinfected barber chairs, folded warm towels, refilled shampoo bottles, prepared coffee for early customers, arranged magazines neatly on the waiting tables, placed fresh flowers at the reception desk. By 8 o'clock, everything sparkled. Customers often assumed she was part of management because of the pride she took in her work. Soon she learned every customer's routine. Mr. Benson always wanted black coffee before his hair cut. A famous football player refused anyone touching his lucky cap. One elderly professor read exactly 3 newspaper pages before entering the barber's chair. Blessing remembered every detail. If a child became frightened during a haircut, she knelt beside them with a warm smile and funny stories until they laughed. Parents noticed, executives noticed, celebrities noticed. Even the security guards noticed, but not everyone celebrated her popularity. Some employees grew jealous. Nancy at the reception whispered, "Customers thank her more than us." Another cleaner muttered, "She's only sweeping floors." "So why does everyone talk about Blessing?" One barber complained, "The owner praises her every day." "I've worked here longer than she has." They began giving her the hardest duties: cleaning blocked drains, carrying heavy water containers, staying late after everyone had gone home. Whenever supplies disappeared, they quietly suggested Blessing had misplaced them. Whenever mistakes happened, they hoped Frank would blame her. Yet somehow, every accusation collapsed because customers kept praising her honesty. Every evening, Frank reviewed customer comments. One sentence appeared again and again. "The young cleaner made our visit unforgettable." Frank scratched his head. How does someone sweeping floors improve customer ratings? Even he couldn't explain it. What nobody realized was that someone very important had also noticed. Every Tuesday afternoon, a distinguished gentleman arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. He never missed an appointment. He was polite, soft-spoken, always dressed in elegant tailored suits. Even his shoes seemed to shine brighter than everyone else's. Nobody knew much about him. His name was Mr. Havallis. He tipped generously but never boasted about his wealth. Unlike many wealthy customers, he greeted every employee by name, including the cleaners. Each week, Blessing quietly offered him coffee, prepared fresh towels, and wished him a pleasant afternoon. Their conversations lasted barely a minute. Yet Mr. Havallis always left with a thoughtful smile, unknown to almost everyone. This quiet gentleman was one of the world's most respected philanthropists, traveling from country to country supporting hospitals, orphanages, schools, disaster relief projects, and charity organizations. And without Blessing realizing it, he had already begun observing something far more valuable than her work. He was studying her character. The rain hammered against the salon windows as thunder rumbled across the evening sky. One by one, the last customers hurried outside, holding newspapers, handbags, and jackets over their heads as they disappeared into the wet streets. Inside the barber shop, only the employees remained. The buzzing clippers had fallen silent. The lively conversations were replaced by the gentle sound of mops sliding across the shiny floor. Blessing tied her cleaning apron tighter and picked up her broom. She always cleaned every corner thoroughly. "If dust pays rent," she often joked, "then it should at least introduce itself." The other cleaners laughed. "Blessing, even the dust is afraid of you." She smiled and continued working. As she reached the oldest barber chair near the window, she knelt to sweep beneath it. Suddenly, something reflected the bright ceiling lights, a tiny flash of gold. She paused. At first she thought it was a bottle cap. Curious, she stretched her arm underneath the chair. Her fingers touched something cold, heavy, smooth. She slowly pulled it out. Her eyes widened. It was an astonishing gold wristwatch, not an ordinary watch. Its golden strap shimmered like freshly polished treasure. Tiny diamonds circled the elegant face, sparkling with every movement. Even someone who knew nothing about jewelry could tell it was worth a fortune. Blessing could barely breathe. Where could this have come from? Before she could say another word, Frank looked up from the reception desk. He saw the glitter. His face instantly changed. "What are you holding?" Blessing slowly raised the watch. "I found it beneath the chair." Frank hurried over. His hands almost snatched it from hers. Within seconds, every employee surrounded them. One barber whistled loudly. "That thing could buy my entire neighborhood." Another laughed. "I've already named my future mansion." A cleaner joked, "I'm resigning tomorrow." Everyone burst into laughter. Frank, however, wasn't laughing. He carefully examined the watch. There was an engraved family symbol on the back. The diamonds looked genuine. The gold felt solid. His breathing became slower. His mind was already calculating numbers. He lowered his voice. "Listen carefully." Everyone leaned closer. "If nobody comes asking for this," he whispered, "we sell it." Several employees exchanged nervous glances. Frank continued, "Imagine what this money could do. We could move this little barber shop into the biggest shopping mall in the city. We'd have expensive chairs, luxury mirrors, air conditioning, our own television commercials." One barber smiled. "I'll finally stop taking the bus." Another added, "I'll buy my mother a house." Someone else laughed. "And I'll marry before the price of weddings goes up again." The room filled with excited chatter. Only Blessing remained silent. Her stomach tightened. The watch didn't belong to them. Someone out there was probably searching everywhere in panic. Perhaps it was a wedding gift. Perhaps it belonged to an elderly man. Perhaps it held memories that money could never replace. Frank noticed her expression. "What?" Blessing spoke softly. "Shouldn't we try to find the owner?" The laughter disappeared. Frank folded his arms. "And how exactly?" "People lose things every day. If they don't come back, it becomes our blessing." Several workers nodded in agreement. One even said, "Maybe heaven finally remembered we're underpaid." Everyone laughed again. But Blessing couldn't. Her grandmother's voice echoed inside her heart. Kindness is doing what is right, even when nobody is watching. Those words had guided her since childhood. That night, after locking the shop, Frank carried the watch into his office. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk. He wrapped the watch inside a small velvet cloth. Then he locked the drawer with a tiny silver key. Before leaving, he checked the lock twice, just to be sure. Outside, the rain continued falling. Blessing walked home through puddles, her shoes completely soaked. But the rain wasn't what kept her awake. It was the watch. She tossed from one side of the bed to the other. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined the unknown owner desperately searching pockets, bags, cars, and retracing every step. Meanwhile, another thought troubled her. What if Frank sold it? What if everyone shared the money? Would she become part of a theft simply by remaining silent? Near dawn, she finally made a decision. The next morning, she arrived before sunrise. The streets were still quiet. The barber shop was empty. The morning cleaner had not yet begun sweeping. Blessing unlocked the cleaning cupboard. Inside hung a small ring of spare keys that the morning staff used in emergencies. She stared at them for several seconds. Her hands trembled. "I am not stealing," she whispered. "I am protecting what belongs to someone else." She found the office key. Her heartbeat echoed loudly in the silent building. Every tiny sound made her jump. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Tick, tick, tick. She unlocked Frank's office. The room smelled of aftershave and fresh paperwork. She carefully opened the desk drawer. There it was. The golden watch looked even brighter in the morning sunlight. She wrapped it inside a freshly washed white cleaning cloth. Then she quietly slipped it into her cleaning bucket beneath several folded towels. She locked everything exactly as she had found it. No fingerprints, no signs anyone had entered. Before the other workers arrived, she carried the bucket outside. Behind the shop stood an old storage room that everyone believed contained only broken furniture. Hidden behind a loose wooden panel was a tiny compartment her late grandmother had once shown her years earlier when they worked nearby. Blessing gently placed the wrapped watch inside. She whispered, "Stay here until your owner is found." She closed the panel. No one could possibly notice. Hours later, Frank walked into his office humming happily. He unlocked the drawer, reached inside, then suddenly froze. The velvet cloth was there, but the watch was gone. His face drained of color. He emptied the drawer. Nothing. He searched the shelves. Nothing. His breathing became heavier. He yanked open every cabinet. Nothing. Then his voice exploded through the shop. "Who took it?" The entire salon fell silent. Customers turned to stare. One little boy getting a haircut whispered to his father, "Is someone going to jail?" His father quietly replied, "Just don't move your head." Frank stormed into the main room. His eyes burned with anger. "No one leaves!" The employees stood frozen. "I want answers!" One cleaner lifted both hands. "I haven't even entered your office." Another barber emptied his pockets dramatically. "Look, all I have are chewing gum wrappers." A stylist nervously laughed. "If I owned that watch, would I still be eating instant noodles every day?" Nobody smiled. Frank ordered everyone to open their lockers. Every bag was searched, every shelf, every cupboard. Even the rubbish bins were emptied onto the floor. Hair clippings flew everywhere. Cleaning supplies spilled across the tiles. Customers quietly slipped outside, pretending not to notice the chaos. Still, nothing. No watch, no clues, no fingerprints, no witness. Only Blessing stood quietly in the corner, her heart pounding so loudly she feared everyone could hear it. She knew the truth, but she also knew the story was only beginning. Days passed. The missing watch became the biggest mystery Frankie's barber shop had ever experienced. Customers discussed it while waiting for haircuts. Some believed a clever thief had stolen it. Others whispered that perhaps the owner had secretly returned and collected it without anyone noticing. Even the employees had their own theories. One barber joked, "Maybe the watch grew legs and walked away." Everyone laughed. Everyone except Blessing. Every morning she silently checked the hidden compartment behind the old wooden panel. The watch remained exactly where she had placed it. She prayed only for one thing. "Lord, please let the rightful owner come." Then, one bright Monday morning, the peaceful atmosphere outside the barber shop suddenly changed. A sleek black luxury limousine slowly pulled up beside the entrance. Behind it came two expensive SUVs. The doors opened. Several smartly dressed security officers stepped out first. They calmly looked around before opening the rear passenger door. Pedestrians stopped walking. Nearby shopkeepers leaned outside their businesses. Customers inside the barber shop stared through the glass windows. One whispered nervously, "I hope nobody forgot to pay for their haircut." Another customer laughed. "If they arrest my barber before he finishes my haircut, I'm demanding a refund." The room filled with uneasy laughter. Then a tall, elderly gentleman stepped out of the limousine. His silver hair was neatly combed. His navy blue suit was perfectly tailored. Though his appearance reflected great wealth, kindness shone through his eyes. He entered quietly. The entire shop fell silent. Frank immediately stood. "Good morning, sir." The gentleman smiled politely. "My name is Mr. Havallis. I believe I accidentally left my gold watch here last week." Frank's smile immediately stiffened. He forced himself to remain calm. We've been looking everywhere." Mr. Havallis nodded slowly. "I understand." He looked around the room. His voice softened. "That watch is worth money." "But money isn't why I'm searching. It belonged to my late father. My father wore it every single day for 37 years. When he passed away, it became the only possession I refused to sell." The room became painfully quiet. Even the buzzing hair clippers stopped. Several employees lowered their eyes. Frank suddenly felt ashamed of the conversation they had shared a week earlier. Blessing stepped forward respectfully. "Sir, would you kindly describe it?" Mr. Havallis smiled gently. "The strap is solid gold. 12 tiny diamonds surround the face. Inside the cover is engraved," he paused, "To Theodore. Keep your promises." Blessing's heart filled with relief. Every detail matched. She smiled softly. "I believe this belongs to you." Everyone watched in complete silence. Blessing carefully walked into the storage room. She knelt behind the loose wooden panel. Her hands gently lifted the neatly wrapped white cloth. She returned slowly. Every eye followed her. With great care she unfolded the cloth. The gold watch sparkled beneath the shop lights. Mr. Havallis froze. His hands trembled as he received it. For several long moments, he simply stared. His eyes slowly filled with tears. His thumb gently touched the engraving. Then, for the first time in many years, the wealthy businessman openly cried. He whispered, "Father." The entire barber shop stood in respectful silence. Mr. Havallis finally looked toward Blessing. "You protected this when you could have become wealthy overnight?" Blessing nodded. "It never belonged to me. My grandmother taught me that borrowed things always find their way home." Mr. Havallis smiled warmly. "There are many people with wealth. There are many people with education. There are many people with influence, but people with genuine character are becoming rare. You are God-sent." He shook Blessing's hand. Then, to everyone's surprise, he bowed his head slightly before her. Frank felt his face burn with embarrassment. The employees finally understood exactly why the watch had disappeared. Nobody accused Blessing. Instead, every one of them felt convicted. After thanking everyone, Mr. Havallis quietly returned to his limousine and drove away. Life inside the barber shop slowly returned to normal, or so everyone believed. A week later, a polished black executive car stopped outside Blessing's tiny apartment. Children playing football nearby immediately surrounded it. One whispered, "Maybe she's becoming a movie star." Another replied, "No, she probably won the lottery." A neatly dressed assistant stepped out carrying a sealed cream-colored envelope. "Miss Blessing? Mr. Havallis requests the honor of your presence." Blessing stared at the invitation in disbelief. She borrowed a simple dress from her neighbor because she owned nothing suitable for such an important meeting. The following morning, she entered one of the tallest office buildings in the city. Its polished marble floors reflected the bright chandeliers above. She had never seen such luxury before. She quietly wondered if her shoes were too dusty for the expensive carpet. Mr. Havallis welcomed her warmly. Then he revealed something she never expected. "I didn't invite you here because you returned my watch. I invited you because I wanted to know who you truly are." He explained that after leaving the barber shop, he had quietly asked people throughout the city about her. Not to expose her, not to reward a single good deed, but to discover whether honesty was her habit or merely good luck. His team had spoken to dozens of people. Street children remembered how she shared her lunch. Widows remembered blankets she secretly donated during cold nights. Taxi drivers remembered her paying fares for strangers. Hospital workers remembered her visiting patients who had no family. Cleaners remembered how she worked extra hours whenever someone became sick. Shopkeepers remembered her returning money they had accidentally given her twice. Finally, they found Kevin. The former street boy smiled proudly. "I wouldn't be alive if Blessing hadn't believed I could become someone." Every testimony matched. Not one person had anything bad to say about her. Mr. Havallis smiled. "I wasn't searching for someone who found a watch. I was searching for someone who never lost her values. He offered her a powerful position within his international charity foundation. Blessing accepted with tears streaming down her face. The years that followed transformed countless lives. Blessing traveled across villages forgotten by the world. She built schools where children once studied beneath trees. She established clean water projects where families had walked for hours carrying heavy buckets. She funded hospitals, built orphanages, created scholarships for brilliant students who could never afford school fees. She introduced skills training for widows and unemployed youth. She organized emergency food relief during droughts and floods. She never forgot where she had come from. Whenever she visited a new country, she insisted on eating with cleaners before attending meetings with presidents. She always greeted security guards before greeting ministers. She remembered every lesson life had taught her. Years became decades. Her wisdom, humility, and compassion earned respect across Africa, Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Then came the day that changed everything. At the Foundation's Grand International Conference, thousands of delegates from every continent filled a magnificent auditorium. World leaders, business executives, volunteers, teachers, doctors, students, all gathered to witness history. Mr. Havallis slowly walked to the podium. His voice carried emotion. For 40 years, I have searched for the right person. I discovered her in the least expected place. Not inside a boardroom, not inside a palace, but holding a broom in a small barber shop. The audience erupted into applause. He invited Blessing onto the stage. As she approached, the applause grew louder. Some people stood, then everyone stood. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Mr. Havallis placed the Foundation's presidential medal around her neck. Today, I retire. And today, I proudly introduce the next president of the International Charity Foundation. Blessing could barely speak through her tears. She looked across the audience. Then she noticed a familiar face. Frank, older now. His hair had turned gray. His barber shop had survived. His character had changed. After the ceremony, he approached her slowly. I almost sold that watch. Blessing smiled. But you didn't. Frank looked surprised. I wanted to. But because of you, I learned that every dishonest shortcut eventually becomes the longest road. Blessing gently placed her hand on his shoulder. We all make mistakes. The important thing is deciding who we become afterward. Frank smiled. I've spent years teaching my apprentices that story. They call it the missing watch lesson. They both laughed warmly. As the sun set outside the conference hall, Blessing quietly looked toward the sky. She whispered the words her grandmother had spoken so many years before. Kindness is like planting mango trees. You may wait many years, but someday the whole world may rest in your shade. Looking around at the thousands of people whose lives had been transformed, she finally understood what her grandmother meant. The greatest rewards in life rarely arrive the day we do good. Sometimes they travel slowly. Sometimes they arrive disguised as ordinary moments. Sometimes they begin with a broom, a hidden watch, and one difficult decision. For riches can fill a house, power can fill a nation, fame can fill a stadium, but only kindness can fill generations with hope. And long after gold loses its shine, a life of honesty continues to light the path for others.